Homestead, and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at the breakdown of the different types of Judaism in Israel. So not worldwide, but in Israel, because a lot of times we talk about kind of like the three main types of Judaism, but I think it applies mostly to the United States, where we're talking about Orthodox Jews, conservative Jews, and Reform. I think that might be just a US thing because I just came across this. This is from Pew Research. And in Israel, rather than in the US or the worldwide, in Israel, it looks like there's basically four main groups of Jews. You can divide them up into four groups. And so the reason why I want to I want to do this video just because, on this channel, one of the things that we study on top of, the second coming, the church, we also look a lot at Judaism. And I like to do that because we are going to integrate with them once the second coming happens. There's a restoration going on, not just for us, but also for them. They're being restored to their homeland. It seems like there's these outreach programs to try and get secular Jews to become more religious. So there's like these revivals, things are being restored. And just like, you have the Northern Kingdom or the 10 tribes that need to be restored and are being restored through the restoration. There's also a restoration of the tribe of Judah, and Benjamin and the Levites. And you could also say the tribe of Simeon, because they were it seems like the tribe of Simeon, based on our research, kind of got assimilated into the tribe of Judah because the land that they had in biblical times, they were basically surrounded by the tribe of Judah. So it seems that most scholars, biblical scholars, believe that they kind of got assimilated into Judah. So when you're talking about the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom would have been Judah, Benjamin, Simeon, and then whatever Levites they had. So I think it's important that we learn as much about them as possible as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because essentially we're kind of like the Northern Kingdom, if you think about it, even though we do have members of the church that are from Judah, Simeon. There's a viewer on my channel that's from Simeon in their patriarchal blessing. But still, you can kind of think of it like that. And one thing that stood out to me in this article is that in Israel, there's about half of the population that are like secular Jews. They don't really, they're agnostic, or they don't really view it as a religion. I mean, they view it more as like a culture than a religion. And that kind of made me think about the parable of the 10 virgins. Now, of course, that applies to the church, right? The church, those that are supposed to be waiting to participate in the marriage feast, we're waiting for the wedding to start. The bridegroom is Christ, but we don't know when he's going to come. So the 10 virgins in this parable representing the church, only half of them are ready. Like, in other words, only half of them have enough oil to last for a long time. Whereas the other half, they only had like the bare minimum, or they just had like enough for one lamp to go through, like a full thing of oil, but that they didn't have extra. And so they weren't ready. They ran out of oil, and so they weren't ready. And so I'm wondering if maybe there's something similar, with the Jews. We know that when Christ comes, there's going to be like a mass conversion. There are going to be Jews that once he identifies himself as Christ and who he really is, he is the Messiah, they're going to accept him. Now, I don't think we know too much about how it's all going to happen other than that. Maybe there's going to be something similar, a corresponding thing where half of them move on into the millennium and half of them don't. Now, we don't know that the parable of the 10 virgins really means that half of the church will not move on into the millennium or be ready. We don't know. But I'm just noticing this kind of curious thing that's happening in Israel, where about half of them uh, would be considered non-religious. So let's look really quick at the different groups. Again, this is from Pew Research. Um, and this is from March 8th, 2016. A new Pew Research Center survey finds that nearly all Israeli Jews self-identify with one of four subgroups. Haredi, which you could call ultra-Orthodox, Dati, which is religious, Masorti, which is traditional, and Hiloni, which is secular. And here's the chart right here. Let me pull this up in a different tab, zoom in. So it looks like they kind of have it arranged. Well, I guess it goes by percentage, but it's interesting because it also kind of goes in order of how observant they are. So Haredi's up here with 9%. They're the most. There's the ultra Orthodox, Dati, which I understand. Now, I haven't read this thing, but from what I skimmed through, it seems that they are also Orthodox, but just not quite at the same level as the Haredi. Masorti with 29%, and then Hiloni with 49%. So now this other, I don't know who that is. Maybe it'll talk about it here. I don't know if that would include Messianic Jews. I don't know if they're still considered Jews if they accept Christ, but they identify as Messianic. So I don't know. But let's read through some of this. Okay. So the Haredim, or the Haredi, right? Because I am, that's plural. It's usually either I am or OT that make the word plural in Hebrew. Okay, so the Haredim are the most religiously devout group in Israel, with 96% saying religion is very important in their lives, compared with 30% of all Israeli Jews. The word Haredi literally translates to trembling or fearing God. Oh, okay, so they are God-fearing. They are trembling. Okay, and most Haredim live their lives secluded from the rest of society. They have few close friends outside their own group, and they generally oppose intermarriage with other Jewish subgroups. Well, that sounds like almost like a religion within a religion. Haredim tend to dress more conservatively, often including large black kippas, or shtreimel, or fedora hats for men, and wigs or other head coverings for women. Haredi men are much more likely to attend religious educational institutions, yeshivas, which also has traditionally exempted them from the mandatory military requirements that other Israeli citizens face, something that has been a recent topic of controversy in Israeli politics. And yeah, that's one thing you remember if you've watched my other videos about Israel, about Naftali Bennett and his partner, or the one that's going to take over for this last part of the government, Yair Lapid. He had some issues with this, with wanting to have the Haredi also serve in the military, mandatory military service. Because I guess up until now they've been exempt. Fully 83% of Haredim favor keeping these exemptions, but less than half of all other Jewish subgroups agree. Haredim are more ambivalent about the state of Israel than other Jews in some ways, because some have long felt that there should have been the establishment of a formal Jewish state before the arrival of Messiah. There should not have been the establishment of a formal Jewish state before the arrival of the Messiah. For example, Haredim are far less likely than other Israeli Jews to identify as Zionists. Now, that's interesting because basically what that's saying is it seems like they think that when Messiah um, appears that he's the one that should create the country, the nation of Israel. So that's very interesting. These might be the same ones that kind of like oppose going up to the Temple Mount because you risk standing on holy ground, somewhere that you shouldn't be, basically like desecrating it. Um, so anyway, okay, so that's the Haredi. I have another website pulled up here, Culture Trip, and they also kind of do a breakdown. I just want to see what they say as well. Okay, Haredi, Haredim, commonly referred to as ultra orthodox, take their name from the Hebrew word hared, the one who trembles at the word of God. According to Pew Research, okay, they are the most devout, with almost all adults, 96%, believing in the importance of religion in all aspects of life. The community relies on the advice of their rabbis to guide them through important decisions, such as whom they should marry, where they should live, and where they should work or study. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Um, sometimes, I mean, you don't really necessarily, I guess we kind of do a little bit of that uh, in the church. Like, for example, when you get married, you go in for an interview with the bishop, and it's not really for the bishop to necessarily tell you not to get married, but you could receive some spiritual advice in that. And there are people that, they go to the bishop to consult with him, maybe get a little bit of guidance. So that's interesting. Okay, continuing. A close-knit community, the Haredim socialize or marry within their own subgroup. Arranged marriages are quite common and avoid contact with the secular world, preferring not to watch television or use the internet. Wow. Okay, so I did not know that it was quite like this with them. They have their own synagogues, yeshivot, and community-driven organizations. They dress conservatively and modestly, favoring dresses, excuse me, long skirts and wigs if they are married for women, and large black skull caps, black hats, or fur hats known as strimals for men. Haredi culture holds in high regard men who dedicate their lives to studying Talmudic text in institutions known as yeshivas and kollels, and the government encourages the study of the Torah by paying them a small stipend. What? The government encourages the study of Torah by paying them a small stipend. Ah, okay. However, it is common practice for women to work to support their families. What? What? Well, now that is interesting, isn't it? Now, I don't. Gosh. Okay, here we go. I don't mean to bring up uncomfortable topics, but um, when it comes to when it comes to polygamy, I think that was somewhat common because like when you have a family where there's one man and multiple women, it seems like the women have to do more work, or there could be like stages where if you have one woman that's having children and she's like raising her small children, maybe the other women work more to help support the family. Uh, there's a I'm not sure that anything was ever really formally enacted in those families because I remember reading a church essay where it was talking about how there were different styles, different methods that people used. It's not like um, enough time had gone by to really establish customs or ways of running a family. And even if there were, each family is different. But anyway, that's just kind of interesting because anyway, I don't know. I'm not going to go too far into that. Okay, now we're at the Dati. Okay, so we just went through the ultra orthodox, the Haredi or Haredim. Okay, now we're talking about the Datiim. Datiim are nearly as religiously devout as the Haredim. About 9 in 10 of those surveyed from both groups say that they are absolutely certain in their belief in God, and nearly all surveyed from either group say they do not travel by car, train, or bus on the Sabbath in accordance with Jewish law. However, Dataim, sometimes described as modern Orthodox Jews, are much more integrated into modern Jewish society. For instance, Datiim are more likely than Haredim to say they value career success and world travel. The Dati men are much more likely to serve in the Israeli military than Haredi men. Dati citizens also tend to be active in Israeli politics. A majority among Datiim describe themselves as part of the political right, and fully 71% agree that Arabs should be expelled or transferred from Israel, significantly more than any other Jewish group. Uh, really? More than the Haredim? Should be expelled significantly more than any other Jewish group. 71%. Okay. They also are more likely than those in the other three groups to say building Jewish settlements in the West Bank helps Israel's security. So that's interesting because you would excuse me, you would think that they wouldn't outdo the Haredim on those matters, but I guess they do. So that's the Datim. Now let's see what it says on this other site. Dati, originating from modern Hebrew, means modern Orthodox or religious. Although members of the Dati group are as religiously observant as the Haredim, they are not opposed to the idea of integrating into modern society and working secular jobs. Datiim make up 10% of adults in Israel, and nearly all of them believe in the existence of God. Just like the Haredim, their community follows the Jewish law to the letter. They observe Shabbat, study the Torah, keep kosher, and dress modestly like the Haredim. But the men wear skull caps, and the women cover their hair if they are married, though not necessarily with a wig. I never knew about this whole wig thing until now. Dress modestly like the Haredim, but the men wear skull caps. So do they not wear the strimal or the fedoras? That's one thing I don't know. The Datiim value career and success and world travel, and the men are more likely to serve in the Israeli military than are the Haredim. Okay, so let's look at the pie chart again. So here you have, with this pie chart by Pew, in 2016, it's saying 9% Haredi, 13%, opposed to 10% from this website, 13% Dati. So I guess if you were to look at this group right here, these are the ones wearing the black and white clothing. Although based on what we saw from this website, the Dati just wear the skull caps, I guess, the kippas. I don't know, maybe sometimes they wear the fedoras and the strimals. Okay, but now let's look at the Masorti. The Masorti, okay. Masortim are the most diverse of the four Jewish groups. They encompass a large middle ground between the two Orthodox groups and secular Jews. About half, 51%, say religion is somewhat important in their lives, as opposed to very important, 32%, are not to / not at all important, 16%. While the three other Jewish groups often have strong opinions on one side or another on many issues relating to religion and public life, Masortim are generally much more divided. For example, while strong majorities of both Haredim and Datiim favor shutting down public transportation during the Sabbath, and over 9 in 10 Hilonim Jews oppose it. The Hilonim, that's the next group. Those are the secular ones. Masorti respondents are split on the issue. 44% are in favor and 52% oppose. Masortim are also more likely to have Jewish friends from outside their group than the other three who, for the most part, socialize with members of their own community. According to surveys conducted over time, Masortim may be declining somewhat as a percentage of Israeli Jews. Okay, so the Masorti, according to this pie chart, 29%. So more than a quarter. More than a quarter. Okay, what's it say on this website? The Masortim, whose name translates as traditional people, make up 29% of Israeli Jews and are identified as the country's second largest group. Now, see, again, I'm no expert, but the more I learn, it seems like the Masorti probably line up more with the conservative Jews in America, because they're like the middle group, those that they don't dress like the Orthodox. They usually they'll wear kippas, but they wear just kind of like modern clothes, and they're basically just you know regular modern type people rather than Orthodox. And then it would seem to me that the Heloni probably correspond with the Reform Jews, where it's more of a cultural thing. They have female rabbis, which I don't think that they do within Orthodox Judaism or conservative. I'm not sure about that, so don't quote me. But they lean a lot more to the left. The Reform Jews do, and so they probably match up a lot more with the Heloni. But okay, so let's continue. Responded, favorite Jewish friends. Okay, we already read that. Okay, so now let's go on to what it says here about the Masorti. The Masortim, whose name translate as traditional people, make up 29% of Israeli Jews and are identified as the country's second largest group. When was this put out? This was May 5th, 2019. So maybe this is like updated information from this. Okay. Or maybe it's based on, different data. Out of the four groups, they hold the most diverse views and live between the boundaries of Orthodox and secular teachings. So while they may not conform to religious practices fully, they are more likely to follow Jewish laws and traditions compared with secular Jews. They will avoid non-kosher food, observe the separation of milk and meat in the kitchen, and take part in traditional events such as bar mitzvah and brit milah. I don't know what brit milah is. I'm familiar with bar mitzvah, and I think there's bat mitzvah, which is for girls. Bar mitzvah for boys, bat mitzvah for girls. I'm okay. The men don't always wear a kippah. That's the skull cap. And if they do, it's mostly on Shabbat and during Jewish festivals. While the Haredim and Datiim are united in their views of not using public transport during Shabbat, the Masortim are split on the issue, with 52% opposing the closure. They are also more likely to marry outside their group and maintain close ties with the other subgroups. Less than half of the Masortim's close friends are from their own group, according to the Pew Research survey. Okay, so now our last group, the Helonim, according to this figure, 49%, so almost half. So now when we're talking about if there's like a similar parable, or if the parable of the 10 virgins kind of apply to the Jews as well, which strictly speaking it probably doesn't, because it's referring to the church. But just like how you have kind of like these two divisions, you have the restored church, which it's mostly like the northern kingdom being gathered again, and then you still have Judah. Okay, it's like there's these two groups, and so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's kind of the same breakdown. Like when Christ comes during the second coming, you're going to have Haredi, Dati, and Masorti people that are not living a terrestrial law because it's it's not so much about groups. It's not like if you're Haredi, you were definitely living terrestrial law. But so it's individual, but this may kind of serve as somewhat of a guide. Maybe it's about half, you know, maybe within our church, maybe it's about half. Maybe within Judaism, it's about half. And also, I should mention there could be Haloni people that are living a terrestrial law and they're doing just fine. So you can't really paint with broad strokes. Um, it's individual, but this still may serve somewhat as kind of a guide, maybe. Okay, so let's read about them. Helonim. Helonim, who tend to be secular in their outlook, are by far the largest Jewish group in Israel, making up roughly half of Israeli Jews. Only 18% are absolutely certain in their belief in God, and 40% do not believe in God at all. Helonim strongly favor the separation of religion from public life in Israel. For example, they overwhelmingly oppose shutting down public transportation during the Sabbath. Helonim are the only Jewish group in Israel among whom a majority, 59%, say their Israeli identity comes before their Jewish identity. So their national identity comes before their religious identity. At the same time, overwhelming shares of Helonim say they are proud to be Jewish and believe a Jewish state is necessary for the survival of the Jewish people. Large majorities of Helonim say they partake in Jewish rituals, but these include events that could be seen as cultural rather than religious, such as lighting Hanukkah candles or attending a Passover Seder. The Seder, that's the Passover meal on the first night of, or the first night of Passover. These views reflect the fact that 83% of Helonim see being Jewish as a matter of ancestry and culture rather than as a matter of religion. Helonim also overwhelmingly say all or most of their close friends are like them, secular, and they're also especially likely to marry within their own group. So that's interesting. So there you have it. You have kind of like the two polar opposites, and the polar opposites tend to marry within their own group, whereas the middle ground, the Masorti, they have friends from different groups and intermarry. So it's just like what it sounds. You have the two extremes in the middle, and the middle is the one that kind of associates more with the other groups. Okay, so on this website, Culture Trip, it says the Helonim are the largest Jewish group in Israel, making up almost half of Israeli Jews. As the number of immigrants from European countries has increased, so has the number of secular Jews in Israel. Now see, that's interesting because we know that Europe has really declined when it comes to um, religion and has increased in its secularism over the years. So I don't know. Could it be that mostly you have this, as you're importing Jews from Europe, you're also importing the secularism that they've become accustomed to. Their name comes from the Hebrew word hulin, meaning secular or mundane. While the majority of them share a secular outlook and consider Judaism to be about tradition, culture, and ancestry rather than religion, about 18% of the community are certain in their belief in God. Only 18% certain. They observe Hanukkah and attend Passover celebrations, but consider these to be cultural rather than religious events. The Helonim clash with the Haredim over the latter's lack of participation in the Israel Defense Forces, or the IDF, and for supporting stores closure during Shabbat. The Helonim are also likely to marry someone from their group and socialize with people who share their views. Although the Chilonim are proud to be Jewish and believe in a Jewish state, 59% say they consider themselves Israeli first and Jewish second. Okay, so there you have it. Okay, so when we're talking about Israel, the country of Israel, this is how things break down. They don't necessarily break down into Orthodox, conservative, reform, although there do seem to be corresponding groups. The Haredi and Dati seem to correspond with Orthodox Jews. The Masorti seem to correspond with conservative Jews. And then the Hiloni seem to kind of correspond with Reform Jews when you're looking at those groups here in America. So this is something new that I learned. Oh, one last thing. Within the Haredi, there are different branches. Within the Haredi, you have the Hasidic movement, or the Hasidic people. So it says, well, never mind. But basically, these are the people, from what I can tell, these are the ones that do the kabod, which is the outreach to the Hiloni and other Jews to try and get them more living a more Jewish life. So there's even more, there's even more groups and different groups. So, but this is just kind of like a basic breakdown in terms of actually living Judaism. You have to also understand you have, kind of like the two main groups of the Sephardic Jews and also the Ashkenazi Jews, where it doesn't so much have to do with how they practice the religion, but rather where they come from in the Jewish diaspora. So Sephardic is from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, whereas the Ashkenazi are mostly from Eastern Europe, right? But so that's kind of like one way to look at it, but this is how you look at it in terms of like how the religion is lived or viewed. Okay. All right, that's gonna be it for this one. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something new along with me. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.